Live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., this is the RCWR Show with your host, Lee Sanders.
And a very good evening to you all. This is the one and only Lee Sanders coming at you right now, live on December 19th, 2012, 11 o'clock p.m. on the East Coast. Very good evening to you all. We're doing a very special episode of the RCWR Show tonight. We're going to be covering the fallout from the Connecticut shootings. And joining us is going to be a very special guest, Dr. Bart Rossi, who is a renowned psychiatrist. You can see him anywhere on Fox, CBS, NBC. You name it, you'd be able to see him. You'd recognize the face as soon as you see him. He's going to be joining us shortly to talk about the tragic events that had happened in Connecticut last Friday. Also joining us, as always, the lovely co-producer Tammy. Tammy, how you doing tonight?
Oh, good, Lee. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. For those of you that are interested in joining in on the discussion, as we will read some of you all's comments from our chat room, you can do so right now by going to blogtalkradio.com/the RCWR Show. We're not going to be opening up the phone lines tonight. It's not one of those type of shows from what we usually do. So if you want to interact with us, the chat room is the best way to do it for tonight. But in the meantime, let's just set this up real quickly, Tammy, because unfortunately and surprisingly, we do have those that may have been under a rock. They may have missed, what all was going on last Friday, of course. I remember you had texted me last Friday, and I was just stunned at the news that I had heard. But for those of you that aren't real sure what's going on, basically last Friday, sometime in the morning to, I guess, right before the afternoon.
No, it was about pretty much about 9:40.
So definitely in the morning.
Mhm.
Okay. 20-year-old Adam Lanza had forced his way into a elementary school, and basically he had took out, and this is a horrific number to hear, 8 boys, 12 girls, 6 adults. Now, of those 6 adults, one of them was the principal, and I believe the other one was a school psychiatrist teacher, or she definitely, if I'm understanding that right. And a lot of questions was asked. Why did this had happened? And a lot of answers are still being asked right on up as we're on the air live right now. And we had reached out to Dr. Rossi to try to help us make a little bit of sense of it all. So with his help tonight, hopefully we could try to answer some of the questions. We might not be able to answer all of the questions tonight, but we could definitely try to cover the main basis. And I'm going to slide in Dr. Rossi in just 60 seconds here. But, one of the things that really jumped out at me, Tammy, was kind of hearing just a little bit about this young man's mentality, the type of, if I were to really describe this young man, definitely troubled, definitely antisocial, as we had heard how of all the people that were going to school, when he was going to school, all the kids, they had backpacks. He was going to school with, a briefcase?
Correct.
We also heard how this young man, he ended up being homeschooled by his mom, and really interesting background of this young man, as at a very early age his family had divorced. He did have a brother, but when the mom and dad divorced, the brother went with the dad, and he stayed with the mother, and it just kind of seems like early on, this is just my honest assessment of this, and I could be wrong. It just seems like he was always craving for some type of an attention, and it looks like he really wasn't quite getting that. He wasn't getting it from his mom to a certain extent, and if he was, I don't know. But let's go ahead and slide in our guest here, Dr. Bart Rossi. Dr. Rossi, how you doing tonight, sir?
I'm good. Nice to be with you.
Oh, no, great to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so try to help us make a sense of this guy. I know, as we were saying in the screening room there, we had just found out that apparently just 3 days before Adam did this horrific act, he was sitting up, and this is according to a neighborhood friend. Am I understanding right, Tammy? That
some friends of the mother.
Friend of the mother that had visited the house, apparently, that this young man was just engulfed with playing a video game, and that game title, according to various sources, was Call of Duty. For those of you that aren't quite familiar with that video game franchise, that's basically a first-person shooter type of military video game. And so, you take that into the consideration that his mother, Nancy Lanza, was a avid gun collector who had quite a few guns in the house, and those guns of which were used for those shootings at that school. Dr. Rossi, what do you make of what you've been able to gather about this young man, profile-wise?
Well, typically, this particular shooter really forms the same pattern or the same profile as many of the shooters, including the one who shot Gabby Giffords and obviously the movie theater person, and some of the others over a long period of time. And the profile usually goes something like this. Typically, the person has what we call as psychologists retained anger, anger that develops over time, and that anger usually generates into what we call a rage, which also moves forward into an explosive personality type. And psychologists talk a lot about this explosive personality type because usually these individuals want to get back at society or the world, or in this case, mother associated with the whole world and society. But believe it or not, these individuals often feel that they're the victim, that they're the ones who have been victimized by the world and society and not treated properly. They've been wronged. So the likelihood to strike out or strike back is there. Now, typically they may not do it to this extreme, obviously, but nonetheless, the pattern, the profile is there, where these folks are angry, to rage, and then this acting out behavior. And, it's something that we have seen over again. Psychologists talk about this as being a personality disturbance or a personality disorder. And when I look at this particular shooter, I see him, of course, and the media talks about him in many different ways, but the focus is on him, while for me as a psychologist, I see him as representative of many individuals in society who have or possess some type of personality disorder. And then, of course, we get into the whole issue of mental health and why I think, mental health should be prioritized. But to answer your other question, I thought you had a good point there about the video game situation, because a lot of people have asked me, well, what does that have to do with this, and what's the influence of these extremely over-the-top video games where violence is so predominant? And I'm one of those who believes that our whole society, not only including video games but movies and so forth, is probably pushing the envelope. Really something that is beyond the pale of reason in terms of how far we've gone with exposing everybody to violence, and it probably is some kind of factor. However, psychologists have also identified the fact that people who may tend to be more violent are more likely to act out are also individuals who will seek out games like this and perhaps play them more or visualize them more often. So the fact that they're seeing these games is not necessarily the key factor, or certainly the only factor in why people act out impulsively. So it's kind of interesting, but you do see this as also part of the profile with a lot of these shooters, that they have a tendency towards violence and acting out and watching these types of videos as well.
And, we're also hearing, but I believe it's unconfirmed, that he may have had autism. Unfortunately, and correct me if I'm wrong, unfortunately there's really no way of telling if that was really the case. As to my knowledge, he's now deceased. You can't really determine that. It's one thing.
Well, actually, that has come up, but actually in the form of Asperger's syndrome.
Right.
And we'll probably get more information about that because maybe the teachers or somebody in the school system may know more about that as he was growing up. But that probably has really nothing to do or very little to do with this. Asperger's syndromes or autism is something where, especially Asperger's, where it's a social or a interaction problem where kids do not interact well. They become more socially withdrawn. Usually the treatment for them is to put them into small groups with kids and have them try to develop social skills. But many kids, many people have this type of syndrome, but it doesn't result in violent behavior like this. So I think the predominant factor here would really be the long-standing history of anger and personality features that develop over time and result in behaviors like this.
Okay. Tammy, you want go ahead, jump in.
Actually, my question is, I actually also was reading up on some of it, and my question is, it looks like there was somewhat of an event to maybe start this, what had happened on Friday, which was the mom was actually trying to help him get a little bit more social and actually wanted him to move, out on his own and try to start, life kind of without her, under his wing kind of thing. Would that have been something that would just have set him off?
Well, that's a good question, actually, because I think what's probably representative there is that mom, in this case, certainly knew or was recognizing over a period of time that he had these problems. He was probably appearing to be socially withdrawn, perhaps depressed with agitation, maybe a sense of hopelessness, a kid who really felt like he was on the outside looking in. She probably had a pretty good sense of this and may have been trying to, push him in a certain direction, either to get help or to at least change his behavior. And to some extent, that might have agitated him even more and pushed him in a direction with that rage and anger. That could be a factor, but it might have been one of the last factors, obviously, that were at work in his whole personality makeup to act out impulsively. So she might have been at the point where, she had tried to contain this behavior for a long time, but probably could recognize she couldn't do it anymore and was trying to get him to move, maybe go for help or something, but it really wasn't working, that's for sure.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, I had another quick question for you, and it's actually been a question that's been on my mind for quite some time, even before this whole incident happened. But do you think at times when we were going back a little bit just to the video games, do you think that some people, whether it be, people that are socially intact, and, also people like, the shooter, do you think that some people have the problem with, dispersing the reality as opposed to the video games and kind of acting out what they see?
Well, again, these are good points, and I think that with some people, who are so saturated with this type of video game and shooting and so forth, they certainly could be influenced. It's certainly a factor. And as a psychologist, I'm not going to dismiss that at all. I think that in our society, again, that we have too much of this. It's over the top, that's for sure. But for someone watching this and repeating this kind of behavior where they go over and over again with this type of video stuff, it may help them or assist them, if you will, in moving forward with actions that are violent. It could be a factor, yes.
Okay.
I'd like to ask you, Doctor, the one thing that just keeps playing over and over in my mind, and, I think of my childhood when I was growing up, and, I've told our listeners many times, when I was growing up, I was pretty much a loner. I have no brother, no sister, and it was pretty much just me left at my own devices. And the thing I had growing up, to kind of make sure that I didn't stray into, violence or, just get in general trouble, I always had my mom there to a certain extent, at least maybe right on up until I was a teenager. Then it was kind of like, I'm trying to find my own way, my own friends and all that. Do you think, and I know it's kind of jumping out on a limb, but do you think that if this young man would have had a little bit more love from the household, because you hear these things that's happening with him, you're just under the impression, man, this sounds like a kid that really just was not really truly loved, if he would have resorted to this type of violence. What do you say to those parents that are listening right now? And we are, of our listeners, we do have quite a bit of them that are parents. What do you say to them as far as trying to make sure that something like this doesn't happen with their kids? What can they do?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually, because we don't know exactly all of the factors that caused this particular young man to develop what I've described as a personality disorder, certainly, at least that. I think you're onto something here that's important. I do think that this kid probably felt, for whatever reasons, and we'll find out over time, that he was rejected certainly by his father, because he didn't speak to him for quite some time now. Probably felt that his mother was difficult or problematic for him, and there was a sense of rejection or anger associated with both parents and family. Now, exactly the depth of that, I don't know. But I do think, to your point, that when kids grow up, they don't need perfect parents. Nobody's going to be perfect. But they certainly need to feel that at least parents are there for them, and that they're concerned, and that they're thoughtful individuals, and all of the rest of the stuff that goes with good parenting. Something went awry here for a long time. We're not talking about the last few years. This is a kid that developed this personality disturbance over many years, and I have a feeling it's probably family, also peer groups, peer group pressure, maybe rejection. I don't know if the kid was bullied, or if the kid felt that he was left out of his group and was really frustrated with that. Probably a little bit or all of the above. Probably something like that caused him to be going down this terrible track.
Very, very interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the singer, but when I had first heard this, and Tammy knew exactly where I was as soon as I said singer, this has just hints of the late singer of Nirvana, Kurt Cobain. You think about that traumatic background that he had when he was growing up in Aberdeen, Washington. He started off, he had his mother, he had his father. They got divorced. He ended up going to live with his dad, but he had always wanted for his parents to stay together, and even when his dad had tried to move on, remarried, he did not like the new wife for nothing, and she went out of her way to really be nice to him, and it just got to the point where Dad felt like Kurt Cobain was just being too disrespectful in his house to his wife, and it was pretty much clean up your act or get out. And there was that little brief period there where he was living on the streets, but it was something that he would go back and say later on in key interviews that was a very traumatic point in his life. And you go back, you listen to some of the music, first thing you know, it's dark, it's very eerie, but you just think about that point in his life and where he ended up, unfortunately, and then you just kind of compare that to what's happening here. It's, without a doubt, definitely something traumatic, profoundly had an impact on Adam.
Yeah, and I think you're describing, family situations that can be very influential and cause, or at least be a part of the personality that develops with certain traits and characteristics that are dark. Usually, though, it's more than that. It's usually also that these people feel depressed or agitated, and they don't socialize well. They have problems with their peer group. They feel rejected overall by the world or society, and that either leads to a suicide, of course, or in this case, acting out behavior that is extreme, very extreme. So there's usually a bunch of factors that lead into a personality disturbance, because we all know that there are quite a few people, of course, in our society that develop reasonably well, even though they have divorced parents or have had a rather unstable family life, but somehow they still do okay, or better than okay. So there's that to be looked at as well.
Wow. Very interesting. Tammy, you want to add in one last thing?
I guess my question is, how can, maybe people who are listening that are in Connecticut, that are close to the family, how best can one support? Because at this point, some people or most people are going to be, how can I help? But I really don't know how.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think as far as help goes, I think there's two ways for me to answer that question for these people that are actively involved in the situation. I mean, we have trouble getting over this, and we're not going to get over it either. We're not going to get past it. It's always going to be something that's going to be on our minds. But for people who are there and involved, two things. In the short run, it's kind of hard. It's difficult. There's no silver bullets. There's no easy therapy that will, that help necessarily. Just support, talking about this, trying to get from one day at a time, dealing with kids that are involved in a very concrete basis and trying to support them and let them know that this is not going to happen to them. But in the longer term, to answer the question, there's more that we can do, because treatment for this stuff, or what psychologists call cognitive behavioral treatment, while it won't cure people, obviously, from something like this, or get them ever really past it, it can certainly help a lot with them coping with a situation like this. And that's something that over time these individuals are going to need. They're going to need as much help as they can to even try to cope with some of this if they're a parent.
Wow.
I can only imagine.
Something that at least I would think 90% of the time, just hug them, say I love you. Sometimes that does wonders. Really.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in the short run. In the longer run, any kind of counseling that's effective with this cognitive behavioral approach, it really is effective. It does work, and we need to prioritize, mental health in this country and not minimize it. That's what I would say.
I so agree. I so agree with that particular point.
And for those of you that are interested, Dr. Rossi, he does have a website that you guys can visit. You can go to B as in boy, Rossi, that's spelled ROSSI.US. I'm going to give that to you one more time. And for those of you that are checking that out in the chat room, we'll make sure we provide the links for you. That's BROSSI.US. You can go to that website, and he posts his articles. I'm at the site right now. He posts his articles, gives great tips. Looks like there's a blog section that's up as well. And, follow that. Best advice is you can get from him on that website there. And Dr. Rossi, we really appreciate you taking the time out to do this interview. It's greatly appreciated. Definitely an eye-opening experience. Really kind of, really helped us out understanding this young man a little more.
Well, nice to be with you guys. Very good questions. Thanks. You guys take care.
Thank you. Thank you, and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Take care.
Bye. All right, bye.
You too.
And that was Dr. Bart Rossi, folks. Thank you so much for coming on to the show there. I can't stress it enough. Just say, I love you. Quite honestly. And I think this is the right episode to do it. I would have to say that for me as a young man right now, I think one of the things in retrospect that had a most profound effect on me growing up was not hearing my mom or dad say, I love you, or giving me that hug and, just giving me that comfort, that everything's going to be okay, that I was loved. And, that goes a long ways, For some, it could end up being the case of what this young man did. For others, such as myself, it can get to a point where you just feel alienated by your family and you don't want to have anything to do with them because there is something that you feel that you're not getting from them. And as a result of that, you're going to try to seek other ways to get that yearning attention, affection that you feel that you've been without and you desire for such a long period of time. And, parents out there, I definitely can't stress it enough because I've been there, I've done that. There's never saying, I love you too much. There's nothing wrong with saying I love you. You can say I love you 100 times in 5 minutes. It's never tiring, I would think. And, it's just very disturbing when you hear this type of stuff. And, just recap this in a nutshell. This 20-year-old kid, I'm going to call him a kid, he just walks up to Sandy Brook Elementary. There's a buzzer that is pretty much the only way you can get in, okay? He bypasses that. He breaks the window, gets himself in there. Principal, psychiatrist, they try to stop him bravely, and he takes them out. Why he targeted those two classrooms, we don't know. Originally, there was a report going out that he sat up and he had just picked these two specific classes. No, these were just two random classes that he had picked. All the other classrooms, they were on lockdown, but he was able to get into these two. And as I said, he killed 8 boys, 12 girls. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, all first graders. And
they were most of them were between the ages of 6 and 7. 6 and
7, yeah. But 8 boys, 12 girls, 6 adults. Those are all the people that he took out. And he heard the police sirens. He heard them coming. He knew what time it was. Rather than do something sane, do the right thing, and surrender, he took his own life. Now, where I come from, the way I was brought up, you hear something like that, first thing you can't help but say, you know what, the fact that this guy took himself out, he didn't try to go through the judicial system, he took a coward's way out. And, I can agree with that statement to a certain extent, but this was definitely a guy that was very disturbed. And, those weapons that he used on those children, on those adults, it can't be stressed enough. These were weapons that were from his own mother's house. And bear in mind, he killed his mom at the house before taking the weapons, right?
Yep.
Before taking the weapons, hopping in her car and driving to the school to do this horrific act. And it's so funny because I was kicking back Sunday and I was watching Meet the Press with Gregory David, and I heard about the weapons that he used. Now, 2 of the weapons apparently he didn't use, as the one main weapon that he had used was a Bushmaster .223 caliber assault rifle, and that name should sound familiar to you guys in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, because those were the same. That's the same weapon that was used in the D.C. Sniping killings. And he also had a Sig Sauer 9mm and a Glock 9mm. And Tammy, the first thing I'm saying to myself when I hear this is, how in the blue hell are you able to get your hands on a Bushmaster assault rifle? And then we learn that one of the many ways that a person can acquire these type of weapons is they can go to a gun show. as normally, you know, you damn sure can't really get these weapons at your typical gun store. And if you can, you have to go through an extensive criminal background check, as well as for all weapons, you have to go through an extensive background check. These guys, they have to follow it to the T, because they're pretty much losing their job if they don't do it to the letter, all right? And, you know, you got some of these people, they don't want to go through that hassle. They just want to get the weapon and they want to be done with. So we have a situation on our hands where you have these gun shows that come, these little independent gun shows. They pop up in various towns, all that. And, hey, basically the way it's set up, okay, you want a gun. Well, I have money, so okay, well, let's make a deal. You know, you got the guns, I got the money. Let's do this. You don't want to go through the criminal background check. I need the money right here and now. Let's do this. And that's pretty much how that's done. And, you know, going forward, that definitely needs to be some of the things that needs to be squashed, is that gun show loophole, because weapons are just, unfortunately, Tammy, going into the wrong people's hands. And, you know, the other problem that the government needs to work on is these federal mandatory required background checks. You know, you and me were talking about this briefly over the weekend leading up to tonight. I can't stress it enough. If you sit up and you are not affiliated with law enforcement, military in any type of way, okay, and you go and you buy a gun, that should be a damn red flag right there that, oh, my God, well, you know, what's going on here? Hey, this person just bought a gun. You know, there should be somebody hired that should be looking into all the names of all these people that are sitting up and buying these guns. And I know some folks are kind of hearing that and they're saying, okay, that's a little bit too extensive. That can't. Well, you know what? Unfortunately, especially after an incident like what happened last week, that's something that needs to happen, because we have so many people that are going through these loopholes. And take, for example, what had happened with the guy a couple of months back who was in the military, and he had got diagnosed with psychiatric problems. Now, it should be noted that the military, they never put into the national database outside of the military that he had psychiatric problems. They just kept it strictly inside the military circle. And what was he able to do? Well, he was able to go get a few weapons, and he was able to kill a few people.
Well, honestly, I think the point is, one of them is the fact that these military-style weapons really don't belong in the hands of people who are common folk, as you could call it, because they just don't. I mean, I understand, you know, you have the sport of hunting and so on and so forth, and you want bigger, more powerful, you know, guns and artillery, but really, no, you know, they end up in the wrong hands, or somebody didn't put this person in the database, and then you have the gun shows that, oh, well, if you give me $50 more, you know what, we can just get the background check. And so there's so many loopholes and or just, you know, mistakes, whether it be data entry or lack thereof, you know, that it's kind of, okay, so where do we go from here? It definitely needs to be looked at for sure.
It does, because look at these statistics. I did my homework for you guys tonight preparing for this. We have 77,000 people, okay, that had illegally purchased guns. They didn't even go through the background check. Out of those 77,000 people, only 77 were prosecuted. Okay? I mean, that you know, that's way too many people that fell through the cracks right there. And, of course, you know, we got to answer the other question that people had been asking. What's going on with President Obama? Now, it should be noted back in 2008, he promised that he was going to close this loophole known as the gun show loophole, and that he was also going to make sure that weapons such as the one that Mr. Lanza had used on all those victims would be eliminated for purchase, the whole 9 yards. And you fast forward to now, he still hasn't done that. So, the pressure is really on him right now, as since he said he was initially going to do that, he has only signed a legislation that gives people the right to carry guns on Amtrak and on college campuses. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear that, I'm thinking to myself, why in the blue hell do I need a gun going to campus? Why do I need a gun on Amtrak? I don't know about you, Tammy, but when I was in college and I was on campus, there was never okay, I better make sure I take my gun before I go to art school. That's just stupid.
I can understand your point, but, I guess that depends on when this happened, because, we need to remember that Virginia Tech happened. And if it's, as far as officers, maybe as far as that point, but I do kind of agree, on some of that is a bit much. But most of the time, college kids, it's all about partying, drinking, and some school.
Yeah. Amtrak, I'm still a little bit rattled by that. Why you want a gun on an Amtrak train? Hey, I don't get that one. But I know you had said that Obama apparently looks like he's going to be signing some type of new legislation to kind of get this ball rolling sometime in January. Talk about that a little more.
Yeah, he's actually looking into new legislation and actually building, or getting the full support of all his team together to look into legislation. I know, on both sides of the aisle, it's kind of a bit of a, pull and tug war kind of thing, but he's wanting to basically have the full support of everybody that wants to come together and, work on legislation. I know that sometimes we get, things that happen and it's like, oh, yeah, that was tragic, but when 20 little kids, under the age of 10, get shot, and because they cannot defend themselves, then you kind of sit up and take notice.
Yeah, and it's so and it's unfortunate that it had to take something like this.
Oh yeah.
To make everybody go, okay, you know what? Okay, it's now time to really get on top of this because enough is enough. And quite honestly, I'm going to share some scary numbers with you guys right now because I have to go through this. Just look at the amount of events along with deaths that it took for it to get to this point where, something needs to happen. April 1999, Columbine shootings, 13 dead. Virginia Tech in April 2007, 32 dead. Fort Hood, November 2009, 13 dead. Tucson, January 2011, 6 dead. Aurora, Colorado, you all should remember that one. Dark Knight Rises theater shootings, July 2012, 12 people dead. Oak Creek, Wisconsin, August 2012, 7 dead. Portland, Oregon, just earlier this month, 3 dead. And, of course, I got to also make sure that I mention the Beltway killings by Lee Boyd Malvo and John Allen Muhammad. Remember, there was that long string of people that were killed there during that streak of time. If I'm not mistaken, the total number of people that were killed by that, I believe the number is, I'm trying to think off the top of my head here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 people. Okay?
Yeah, I remember I was in the area at that point, and it was quite scary.
Yeah. You take all those numbers of deaths since really 1999 all the way up to now. I mean, you're way past 100 just by the numbers I just gave you guys. That sounds to me, and for anybody that's listening in the chat room, you can post those the total number there. I got 13, 32, 13, 6, 12, 7, 3, and 15. Add that up, post the results for me. But that sounds like it's damn right close to 200 people that have died for this talk to finally happen and some type of action to finally be taken. I don't know about you, but that's just too many deaths to finally get the serious talk rolling.
Oh, I completely agree. Sounds like the serious talk is getting a major boost. Like I said, that what I was talking about with Obama looks like he wants it done by, mid to end of January, or at least, having some kind of a bill start to be signed. So, and yeah, that is way too many deaths.
It is. I mean, especially when you just think about those men that were involved in those shootings. James Holmes from the Aurora shootings, Jared Longer from Tucson, Sung Hoon Choi, the Virginia Tech shooter, Eric Harris and Dylan Kelboy, Columbine, John Allen Muhammad, Leroy Malvo. You just hear those, and then you add Adam Lanza into that. It's very scary when you hear that. And, what's even more scary is just to see those guys' pictures. I mean, those guys are part of a elite group right now.
Yeah, to be honest, just kind of like Dr. Rossi was saying, all of those people have something in common, and basically it's some type of mental illness, whether it be a situational thing or something that happened family-wise. And it's converted that somewhat unstable person into, oh my God, what just happened? And at that point, it's like, oh, okay, so what could we have done different? And 9 times out of 10, every time the smoke clears, they've figured everything out. At the bottom of that pile is some type of wrongdoing that happened to them or some type of mental illness.
The NRA for a long time, National Rifle Association, for those of you that don't know, they have for a long time been very strict on negotiations because their whole mentality has been, nope. First and foremost, you have the right to bear arms. Well, goddamn.
Sure, and I'm sure that's, great for, if you're giving every gun to somebody in the Army.
Yeah. Well, no. It's not about, guys in the Army. I believe you do have the right to bear arms, but come on, man, a Bushmaster 223 caliber assault rifle, I don't exactly believe that when our founding fathers were making the Constitution, I don't believe they had in mind that you have the right to have one of those type of weapons or a bazooka gun and you can just go walk it down the street and you got a problem with somebody. I don't believe they meant for those type of weapons to be in your hand. And, for the longest time, the NRA, they have just been hell-bent on not loosening up on some of these legislations that, Congress is trying to get passed. Some would sit up and say that the NRA, they are so powerful, so diabolical is what some would go out on a limb and describe them as, is that they can make or break a president. And it should have been very apparent during this year's elections as the NRA, their number one agenda was to try to get Barack Obama dethroned from a second term. And I know one of the people that they had tried to use to lead the way was Ted Nugent. And as you know, from time to time on the RCWR Show, I have been very critical of Ted Nugent. And he is one guy that I will go out on a limb and I will say he is a dick. And this kind of makes me smile a little bit when I had heard this. Looks like Ted Nugent's show that was on the Discovery Channel, it's not going to be appearing anytime soon, as according to an article from the Raw Story, his series has been canceled along with his American Guns reality show, as a Discovery spokesperson had told the website that the right-wing rocker wouldn't be back on the channel. Now, although Discovery announced the cancellation in wake of last week's shootings in Newtown, Connecticut, the channel didn't link the two in the statement. Direct quote here, American Guns concluded earlier this week, network said. Discovery Channel chose not to renew the series and has no plans to air repeats of the show. Now, Nugent, this fall, he did host a gun country show on the channel, and it was only supposed to be a little mini-series thing, but it ended up becoming a planned series. But Discovery said the episode, which fared poorly in the ratings, was always intended to be a 1-hour special. Now, it should be noted that the guitarist had been an outspoken advocate of gun rights. Went on a little Twitter tirade after President Obama had won his re-election, and he also drew scrutiny from the Secret Service earlier this year after comments he made about Democrats at an NRA convention where he said, direct quote, we need to ride into the battlefield and chop their heads off in November.
Oh, boy, that is something else.
Yeah, this is the same Ted Nugent that sat up and was very disgruntled in a long series of Twitter tirades after Barack Obama secured his second term, saying, and this is a direct quote, you can't make this stuff up, pimps, whores, and welfare brats and their soulless supporters have a president to destroy America. So Obama still demands the hardest workers to provide for non-workers. Shared opportunities, my ass. What subhuman varmint believes others must pay for their obesity, booze, cell phones, birth control, abortions, and lives? He went on to call Americans soulless fools, the economic and spiritual suicide of re-electing Obama. I cried tears of blood for the last best place in the warriors who died for this tragedy. He even took aim at the Supreme Court, saying, so four scouts idiots don't believe in self-defense, pure evil. It all harks back to when Nugent, again, was questioned by the Secret Service earlier this year.
Wow, I mean,
and that's their boy. That's the one they want to represent the NRA and all that. That's their boy when it comes to taking out Democrats. That's their boy.
Well, I mean, I understand, defending, the right to bear arms, but that's taking it to a whole nother level. I understand that the mom wanted to teach her son how to hold a gun, shoot a gun, because she felt it was to give him a sense of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know about you, Lee, but I think that there's, I know that was her own passion, and I think she wanted to share something with her son. But a sense of responsibility, I can think of a whole lot of other ways to teach your son to be responsible than taking him to a gun range.
It's one of those moves that I hear in retrospect, and I say to myself, this young man was already troubled as it is. Why would you take him to a shooting range?
Mm-hmm.
I'm rattled. I'm rattled with that. I don't get that. Little side note for those of you that are calling into the show, if you're trying to get your voice heard on the air, usually we open up our phone lines, but for this type of a particular show, and we had agreed upon this before, just days before we even decided to do this show, that we weren't going to open the phone lines because it's not one of those type of shows. However, if you'd like to leave a comment, we have the chat room that's open right now, and we'll actually proofread some of the comments in the chat room, and we'll read some of them live on the air. You can get your voice heard that way, but it's not one of those type of shows. And I am not the only one that had kind of felt that way. I know co-producer Tammy, you felt the same way as well when we were getting ready to do this.
I did. I don't, I think if you can, you already are under the impression or aware that your son is a little different. And grant you, did he, present violent tendencies? No. But that's really a careful, subject, because especially to put that kind of weapon, especially a military weapon, into the hands of someone who honestly knows how to use it that way, it's 10 times more deadly, because you can just pick them off like flies at that point.
Yeah.
Because at the gun range, you are trained to be able to hit that mark.
It's so funny. It's so funny. Not funny in a ha-ha type of way, but funny as in, wow, how about that? I was watching Charles Bronson last week in Death Wish 1 and 2, and the background for that in a nutshell, for those of you not familiar with that movie, I know Part 1 came out in 1978, and Part 2, 1974, and Part 2 came out around 1982 or something like that. And basically the story of the Death Wish series, there's this guy who unfortunately had lost his wife. Later on, he lost his daughter, and he basically is trying to get revenge on the people that had hurt his family. So he starts learning how to shoot a gun, and next thing you know, he's just this ice-cold killer at nighttime, and he's an architect during the day. And I say that for a reason. The connection is, I was watching that movie, and I was just thinking about how realistic it was, because they didn't glamorize it, is what I'm getting at. When you look at movies like that, and for me, just hours later to hear what had happened at that school, it's like, oh my God, And I just thought back to how I was rooting the guy on, to shoot the bad guys. And I want to switch gears a little bit, and I think it's something that we now need to address going forward, which is we hear that this young man was playing Call of Duty. There's no telling how much how profound effect this had on him into doing what he did. But now the topic is going to be, okay, when you see video games like this, does the federal government now need to really try to amp their game up, step up in a huge way and say, you know what, enough is enough. We don't want these type of video games coming into the hands of folks that really have no business playing it. And, I can't help but think about the age that people should be playing games like this, Gears of War, Battlefield. I can't help but think of the ages of folks that need to be playing this game, because, my pretend sister, Ebony, she works at Toys R Us. And at her Toys R Us, and usually the way all the Toys R Us's do it, is you try to come into the store by yourself and you're 9 years old and you ask for Call of Duty, your ass isn't getting that game. You can forget it. They're going to tell you, come back with your parent, for now, I'm not selling the game to you. Some of them will have the audacity to go get their parent. As it turns out, the parent is in the store. They're just floating around somewhere. And 9 times out of 10, the parent, Tammy, isn't even aware of the type of video game that the kid is asking for, because it's just all about taking care of Junior. Junior wants a video game, just want to get that for him. And Junior is left alone playing an online multiplayer game where he's seeing people get shot up, blood being spilled all over the place, graphic language. You have a headset. You're unfortunately going to hear other people, when you're playing online multiplayer, say, fuck, shit, all these other type of derogatory words that really no 9, 10-year-old should be really saying. But you think about how everything has been, what's the word I'm looking for? It starts with an S. Sensationalized?
Sensationalized?
Sensationalized, thank you. You know, you think about that. You know, when I was 15, I never saw a commercial. And you and me were talking about this the other day. Look how far along the times have changed. You see a commercial now for the Samsung Galaxy commercial. Santa Claus is getting ready to hop on his reindeer. He's getting ready to go deliver Christmas to all the little children. And Mrs. Santa Claus says to him, oh, hey, the elves, they did something for you. And they're like, yeah, Santa, we had made you a really cool video. Check it out during your travels. And he touches phones with them. He's like, oh, thank you. And then Mrs. Santa Claus comes along and she goes, I also made a video for you, too. He goes, oh, thank you, honey. And they touch phones, and she goes, you probably shouldn't watch it out in public. So, you know, you're kind of left with that impression there that, oh, she made a little freaky sex video. You know, 15 years ago, you didn't see commercials like that. 15 years ago, you didn't see commercials plug in a new movie and ass is being said or dick. Mm-hmm. You know, it's very interesting how the times have changed.
Well, you know, we're so much more in a time at this point where the family dynamic has changed so much. And other things are teaching our children and not the parents. You know, whether it's being, you know, I don't know about that particular game and, you know, you're not really aware of what and how, you know, your kids are doing or watching or playing. And then, you know, they are learning, you know, about this or that or the other from what they're playing, watching, and so on and so forth. And then they convert it, depending on how old they are, into somewhat of a norm or reality. Thus, and another thing I was kind of thinking when you were talking about this is, okay, we all know that rated R movies, you have to be 17. If not, you have to get your parent to, give their permission or come with you or be with someone who is of that age. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're going to let your kid not go to a rated R movie, but 9 times out of 10, half of the video games that you have out now are more violent than any movie you would take them to see. And they're 9, 10, 11, and up.
Bring it home. That's exactly. Okay, so let me see if I get this right, okay? You're not going to let your 9, 10-year-old watch a porn video, but you're going to let them see Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, The Dark Knight. You're going to allow your kid to play a very disturbing graphic video game like Gears of War, where they're making a mockery of killing people, where you can do curb stomps, you know, take a person's head off.
Not only a mockery, but a glorifying.
Exactly. You know, you can't just say, well, this is okay, and then this is. No, you have to be firm all across the border. There is no exceptions, because when you make those exceptions, it leads into, well, you know, it's just this. It'll just be a huge domino effect that'll just end up really coming back to bite you in the ass. You know, growing up, I don't know about you guys, but growing up when I was in school and there was video games that I wanted to play, I wanted to be one of the first kids on the block to play Double Dragon. My mom said to me, my mom told me straight up, it's too violent. Well, what can I play? You can play Pac-Man, you can play Mario, but you can't play Double Dragon. I'm like, really? I was not able to play Double Dragon. God, I don't think I was able. I probably was like maybe 8 years old or something like that. I don't think I was able to play Double Dragon. Yeah, because it came out around 88, 87. I don't think I was able to play Double Dragon until 91, 92. You know, my parents were pretty firm, especially my mother. You know, my mom was one of those type of people, you know, hey, I want to have a Nintendo. No, you wouldn't get your work done. I remember when I finally got my Nintendo. I bullshit you not, guys and girls. I finally got my Nintendo when I was 14 years old.
And thus, in a way, she was protecting you to a point. But here's the thing is, you know, not only that, especially for somebody who is already an antisocial person, getting them a Nintendo, Xbox 360, any one of those gaming stations is going to make them even more antisocial. I mean, you know, it just goes without saying, and especially if you don't have any friends, who are you going to play with?
Exactly. And you know what? It's something that can be found with adults. Adults can be antisocial depending on the video game. You and me were joking about this all the time. I was telling you how there's one video game I know if I get, my girlfriend's going to be very upset with me because when you get this video game, and I speak the truth, especially when I name this title, and those of you that have played it, you're going to be like, oh, yes, it's very true. There's this video game series where you could pretty much kiss the life that you know goodbye because you're going to be busy for at least 6 months because it's got like a gazillion hours of gameplay. Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, Skyrim. You get that title, you're antisocial for a good minute, especially since you're not even playing with other people. It's just you roaming around an entire big world. You know, that needs to be, you know, one of the main things that needs to be tackled right now is some of these video games that are coming out, and I don't want people that's hearing this to go, oh, man, Lee hates the video game industry now. You know, I don't hate the video game industry because first and foremost, I'm a graphic designer. I went to school to try to have a career in the arts, whether it be working for DC Comics, Marvel Comics, working with a video game studio. You know, I always had that passion. I still have that passion. You know, I take some of what I learned with me from those classes, and I applied it to, you know, what I do with the show, working on graphic banners, all that. So, you know, I'm not crapping on the video game industry, but what I do have a bone to pick with is some of these titles that are coming out. It needs to become much more harder for some of these kids to get a hold of. You know, I can walk past a GameStop, and I've done it many times, and I've seen a 9-year-old be able to pick up one of those games that I've been able, that I just mentioned. They've been able to buy one of these games, and there's no parent around.
Right. Well, here's the deal is the companies, the game companies, movie companies, you know, any, you know, thing that you could probably name, it's kind of, okay, so what's selling? Let's make more of it. You know, and unfortunately, you have the violence as far as in the movies and in video games and so on and so forth, and it's selling. And maybe it's the curiosity of what happens, but, you know, it's selling. So guess what? They're going to make more movies just like that. And more video games just like that, or with a different twist, of course, because just like that would just be boring, but some kind of a different twist, a different angle, but it's the same thing. I
want to read a couple of valid points that fill up in the chat room. Hey, handmade. And if you'd like to get your thoughts in on this, you can do so as well. And it's funny that you have mentioned movies. There's something I want to bring up with regards to entertainment-wise. With Philip, he has said, do you know why the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment? Right under the First Amendment, freedom of speech. The Founding Fathers weren't concerned about muggers on the street or school shootings. The Second Amendment is the Second Amendment so that we can protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. We, the U.S., have killed around 200 kids in the country of Pakistan alone with our Predator drone attacks since 2004.
Yeah, I mean, in the countries, the European countries, in certain European countries, you have kids that are the age of 6 and 7 who are carrying those type of rifles and think that it's okay because they've been taught that by their parents. And that's a whole other situation in itself, but, very good comments, Philip. Very good.
I want to read you guys a little something here. This is how much of a profound effect these shootings have had on the entertainment industry. I'm not sure how many of you know of the singer Keisha, but she has that song Die Young, and dozens of radio stations have pulled that song after the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting massacres for reasons of sensitivity, says a source that's close to the Columbus media chain, which owns 525 stations, including Q100 in Atlanta and WDVD in Detroit. Quote right here, ultimately, Die Young has content-wise nothing to do with what happened, but a lot of us went, that doesn't feel right. To be even saying the words Die Young right now on the radio. That's not the only thing that's been happening. You know that new movie by Quentin Tarantino, I believe it's called Django? Looks like that has been canceled for a public premiere in Los Angeles in wake of last week's shootings. And this is a direct quote from the movie distributor. In this time of national mourning, we've decided to forego our scheduled event. Now, instead, the film will be screened for a small group of cast and crew and their family friends. Very interesting right there. Quentin Tarantino, he had this to say about it. He said, and direct quote, I just think, there's violence in the world. Tragedies happen. Blame the playmakers. It's a Western. Gimme a break. Now, I've been a long-time fan of Quentin Tarantino, but I think at this time, poor choice of words that he said right there. Poor choice of words. I kind of lost, I must admit, I lost a little bit of respect for him with that. And, so you see that in the entertainment business, it's kind of having its effect. Tammy, do you see it getting back to a point where, it's going to just be swept under the rug and it's going to go back to business as usual? Or do you think, given what had happened, Congress as well as the president, they're now going to look at all spectrums, including the video games? Do you think these shootings, you think it might have caused a domino effect that's yet to come?
Oh, I think it has caused a domino effect, to the point where it's gotten to, okay, it was kind of on the back burner, but now it's been brought to the very forefront of my face and as far as the legislations on gun control. But as far as, movies and gaming and things like that, for right now, yes, it will have an effect to an extent. Do I think that it's going to have a massive effect? No, I honestly don't, due to the simple fact that there's so much out there, and it somewhat goes along with that First Amendment, which is, the freedom of speech, to a point. So it's very sticky subject. because, it's kind of like, okay, well, we know what happened and so on and so forth. Do I think it'll die down? Yes. Do I think it'll kick back up at some point, maybe just a little bit lighter than it was? Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Because it still sells.
You're right about that. I just know the times have changed so dramatically. If I were to offer the best advice right now, and the following advices I'm going to give, it's not 100% bulletproof. Shit can still happen. Let's be for real. Shit can still happen. And if you watch the ID channel, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, but the best advice I can try to give is, number one, for you, and this goes out to the parents especially. Tell your kids you love them. Try to spend as much quality time with them as possible, and I can't stress this enough. Spending quality time is not kicking back and grabbing a controller and playing video games. Okay? Absolutely. That's not quality time. Quality time is going out, tossing the pigskin, playing a little bit of b-ball, playing some soccer, go to the park, go to Six Flags, go to the library, help your kid with their homework, go out to eat. That's quality time. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I can't stress enough, and I'm just going based off of my own personal experience, and, so when I say this, I say this with passion, and I say this with assurance that if you do these things, your kid's definitely going to be off to a very good start in the long haul. But the other thing, I can't stress enough is if you have a kid that is, I would say honestly, under the age of 14, I want to say 15, but I'll say 14, don't get them those hardcore video games. Yeah, you got some of those video games that's out there where you can go and you can see the options section and you can turn off the gore and everything like that. But, it's very easy to go on back and turn it back on, so you're really not helping. And the odds of the gaming developers putting in some type of a passcode in the options section of that video game title is very slim. So really your best bet is to just make sure that extreme games that could leave a profound effect on them in a way that they think that shooting folks is cool. As remember, just a couple of years ago, we had that one guy, very disturbing guy at that, try to emulate the events that had happened in Grand Theft Auto, as he thought it was cool to steal cars and lead police on a chase. Keep games like that away from them until they can really, really grasp reality from non-reality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I can't stress that enough. You may come off feeling like a bad guy, but I freaking promise you, if you just stick to your guts the long haul, your kids will thank you. Trust me on that. They'll thank you.
They might not thank you at that time, but they'll thank you later.
They will thank you later. Yeah.
Another point for me that I actually wanted to, kind of get out there is, I know there's a lot of talk, especially now, on what to and what not to tell your kids. As long as you're sincere and honest with them, as far as on, the events that are happening or what's going on in the world, or just, about your own home situation, they can understand. Take the time to talk with them. Take the time to tell them that you love them. Take the time to be with them. That's what they want. That's what they need. And those things will take you so much further than anything else. I grew up in a two-parent home, and, were things always the greatest? Most times they were. Grant you, we all have our own little whatevers, but I knew I was loved. I knew I was cared for. I knew I was protected. And my parents didn't beat around the bush. This is what's going on, this is what I want you to take away from it. I actually had a very close person to me, which his mother actually passed away, and the grandmother basically said, you know what, we'll just not deal with it. And just, I mean, come on, the kid is 6 years old. He's going to realize his mother's not there. So, it's best to just deal with everything head on and just, identify with it instead of, kind of shoving it under the rug.
I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%. And, for those of you that may have a troubled teen, young adolescent, that's kind of giving you a little bit of problems and, you're not really sure what to do or, what type of help might be out there. There is things, that you can do. There's hotlines that you can call, especially if you believe that, your child, may be suicidal. There's a ton of information that's out there. Google search, it's your best friend. But you have toll-free suicide hotlines where pretty much they listen, and that's all they do. They listen, they take in all the information, and they stay with you till they know that everything's going to be okay, And, you want to take advantage of stuff like that. Get in contact with your local social human services in your area. Don't let it be a pride thing, because that pride thing might come back to bite you in the ass. So swallow that.
Right.
Swallow that pride. Because you actually got some people that, kind of feel a little embarrassed that they have to seek help from the government or whatever like that. Some people got that pride issue. It's not about pride. Right now it's all about safety, health, peace of mind, longevity. That's what you need to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
And, for those of you that would like to try to help out the victims that were affected by those Sandy Hook school shootings, there are a few things that you can do, and I can't stress this enough, and we wanted to make sure we make this point because we heard how there are some people that are out there that are causing a little bit of a scam artists is the name of the game. Tammy, why don't you tell them a little bit more about that?
Well, it's basically like, Lee said, there are scam artists who are basically, for one of the families in particular, somebody had set up an official website or what looked like an official website for one of the families to saying, all donations, cards, gifts, whatever, would be taken and given to the family, sort of like a third party. Well, one of the family members actually happened to see that site and basically reported it to the police because it was a complete fake. And, to people like that, really, I understand times are hard, but that's just cruel.
Yeah.
And I don't...
That is ridiculous.
That's unexcusable. And excuse me for saying that, but you really should go to hell for something like that.
Yeah, that is beyond evil and cruel. But if you're worried about your kid and you think your kid needs help, you can visit the American Academy of Pediatrics, or you can visit the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and they can tell you, how they can help you out. There's other organizations that can help the parents or caregivers of the mentally ill children. And first of all, there's your state. Now, each state runs a mental health agency under the aegis of the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The agency also runs a free disaster disease helpline for anyone who is experiencing distress as a result of a natural or man-made disaster. So they do a little bit of everything there. You can call them at 1-800-985-3383. 5990. Once again, that's 1-800-985-5990. And by the way, as I'm giving this information along, just bear in mind, if you're not able to catch it all right now, you can always download the episode later, write it down, and we'll also have it up in our episode description for you guys, give you the link so you can go directly to it. And again, I was just talking about it earlier, but the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, I want you guys to keep that number handy. That is a free lifeline that is available 24/7, okay? Any people you believe that are in a crisis, even if they're not contemplating suicide, just have them give those folks a call. They deal with substance abuse, economic worries, relationship, family problems, sexual orientations, illness, getting over abuse, depression, mental and physical illness, even loneliness, okay? You can give them a call at 1-800-273-TALK. Pretty easy to remember, right? 1-800-273-TALK, and that's the National Suicide Prevention Health Line. You check those out, and those will go a long, long ways. You can also get in contact with the American Red Cross. For those of you that would like to try to see if you can donate to the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting victims, the family members, you can get in contact with them through American Red Cross. They've actually set something up for the families, and I want you guys to make sure, those of you that feel compelled to donate to the families, I want you to make sure that you take the time out, do your research online, do it right. American Red Cross, that's your first move right there that I would suggest you use to try to get in contact with the family, see if you can donate whatever to them. And be very wary when you're doing your online searches. As to my knowledge right now, there's only just a handful of legit agencies that are trying to help out the families. And you can go to our Facebook page at Infinity One Productions. We'll actually be posting all the information that you'll need to be able to look into that if you're not able to do it tonight. Tammy, final thoughts?
Actually, I did have one kind of thought that came to me, as of what you were talking about, of how to get help and so on and so forth. With Adam's mom, I've been reading a lot of the information, and one thing that seems to be perfectly clear, as I've heard in news reports and read online, she honestly did not talk to many people about her situation with her son, and
pride.
My goodness,
There's that pride.
Yeah, exactly, the pride, and I can only imagine how difficult that must have been, for her, but you have people, not only maybe, the line that you were talking about, but friends and family, people you trust. I mean, everybody has a confidant, that you talk about anything and everything with. Talk to those people, get advice. Okay, what should I do now or next? Or, and especially, professionals and people who can guide you and direct you in a direction that, you feel comfortable. Or maybe even not feel comfortable, and maybe it's the right thing to do. But really start talking, because when people don't know, they just assume, and then nothing kind of gets done, and you're sort of the one-man band, and you really don't know how to handle a situation.
Right.
And that's unfortunate for everybody. Yeah. When it ends up to something like this. And we certainly, our heart and minds go out to the families and the victims of this whole, awful mess and tragedy. Our prayers are with you, especially right now. I can only imagine the hurt that you're feeling at this point, whether you're feeling survivor's guilt or you were one of those unfortunate parents to get that text message. OMG, can I not imagine getting a text message that's saying there's something happened at my child's school. I couldn't even imagine. and to then get there and find out that my loved one, child, did not make it. Our prayers go out to you, and just pray that each day at a time, one day at a time, God heals your heart, and just take it day by day. And we pray for you. Thank you so much.
I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%, and I just feel so bad. Christmas time, that's really going to sting. It's really going to hurt them. Christmas time. I know I would really be hurt Christmas time.
Absolutely.
I agree with everything that you had said 100%. And I don't think I have anything much more to add to that. I'm just pretty numb right now, just thinking about everything that had happened. I know that Adam's laptop was recovered by the FBI. It's down in Quantico, Virginia right now. He did a number on that hard drive. It's going to take them quite a while to try to see if they can repair it and possibly be able to retrieve information from it, try to learn a little bit more about him, what might have led up to those events. Of course, we'll be paying attention to this very closely, and any major updates that we're able to come across, we'll definitely follow up with you guys and let you all know about it. For the lovely co-producer Tammy, for our special guest, Dr. Bart Rossi, really great, insightful thoughts there from the doctor. I really appreciate him to take the time out to join us on this episode, as it's really not really something we usually cover a lot. We do go into serious topics on our weekend edition, but when we had first heard about this, we wanted to talk about it, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure we had the very latest in what was happening. And hopefully, we were able to do a good job for you guys. Hopefully, you appreciated this episode that we did tonight. And that's going to do it. I'm not going to plug any shows because I believe that's tacky. What I will say is visit our profile at blogtalkradio.com/the RCWR Show, and you'll be able to see what all we're going to be doing. And that's good. That's the bottom line. Thank you all for tuning in to tonight's episode. For the lovely co-producer Tammy, I'm the Black Avenger, Lee Sanders. We will see you next time around. Everybody be safe and be kind to one another, folks. Take care.
Good night.